Andrew does that once in a while. Well, everyone, we're actually presenting now, so everybody gets to listen to us talk about our pets and all that good stuff. But hey, everybody, thanks a lot for coming to the Exit Your Way Business Roundtable for another good Thursday session. I'm really pleased to be able to bring this group of experts together to help us work through another what we think is a pretty relevant topic for business owners during this period. You know, as we've talked about the past few weeks, we're not going to be talking about COVID as much as we are talking about moving businesses forward and what we should be doing now. But you know, if you've been under a rock, you haven't seen what's going on. But this week, the unemployment rate is 14.7%. You know, I believe we were running somewhere around 4% prior to this. And last week alone, there were another 1.9 million people that were added to the unemployed list. And those of you that are familiar with this means that there are a tremendous amount of people, because the unemployed list doesn't count for people who just quit looking for work. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about here over the next couple of weeks were figuring out what your business needs now in terms of, I called it human capital or people, which is a much nicer way to say it. And then how do you get those people? And we're going to be talking about that later. But today I've got some great people here. I've got Kelly Robinson from Pan and Nose. She's got a recruiting company that partners with SMBs to help them attract and retain top talent. I've got Lisa Sordelia. There we go. Better. I said it better. She's VP of HR of Energage, HR software company that helps businesses recruit and retain the right talent. I've got Shelly Azen, who is the founder of UnHR, a strategic HR consulting company focused on organizations in people crisis. I gotta say, Shelly's background is really interesting and pretty cool. And then we have Talia Edmondson. Last but not least, Talia. She's been spent 15 years in HR. She's most known for building culture and people operations for a Philadelphia-based e-commerce company called Revzilla, which I actually have heard of before. And that's cool. So I'm just happy to have all of you here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you do to really understand what your business needs and where you're at. So who would like to lead us off a little bit on this subject?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. Good morning, everyone. I think it's morning where everybody is. Yes, I think East Coast, we're the sort of latest in the day group. So good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks for the very nice introduction. As Damon mentioned, I have a consulting business. After being an HR practitioner for 20 plus years, I started doing consulting because I found myself doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions and helping companies in people crisis. And certainly I think I would categorize this time as a time of crisis in a different way, but certainly where I think the role of HR and leadership is very critical. And in particular, we talked a little bit about how do we think about our business moving forward? So now we've been home for 11, 12, 13, 14 weeks, whatever it is. And while we still have some triaging to do with sort of emerging situations like over the last week to 10 days, we're also thinking about how to structure our business for the future. And so what I've been consulting my clients about is similarly, think about when you go through a merger or an acquisition, when you're bringing two businesses together, or maybe just consolidating two departments, you have to think about what will your business look like 6, 12, 24, 36 months from now, and start to structure your company that way to keep you grounded for success, right? And the term that I use a lot with my clients, and even when I was an HR practitioner, is you have to think about the job, not the person, right? So let me give you an example. I have a current client that's an insurance company, about 1,000 people, give or take, work in the building. March 16th, everyone scatters and goes home. And there were something like 7 or 8 or 9 people that worked in a mailroom. As you might imagine, an insurance company has lots of mail coming and going. Well, those folks, technically, if they're leaving the building, how are they going to process the mail? So the company decided to outsource all of their mail to a mail center somewhere in New Jersey across the bridge. And that left those 8 or 9 people without work to do. And as you think about this as a long-term strategy, it's much more cost effective to outsource it to a mail center. But you have 8 or 9 people now you don't know what to do with. Mm-hmm. And so what we talked about is what other areas of the business are changing that we now need to overlap or increase volume. And could we redeploy those 9 people, let's say, into a different department, call center, for example. So when you think about the job, you have to craft the job, not for the person, right? So we think about, we need more people in the mail call center. We need more people in claims processing. And could we redeploy those resources to those 2 areas? The trap that people fall into is you have to create the job for the job, not the job for the person. Mm-hmm. And that's what we can have probably another 45-minute conversation about that. But how do you do it in a way that you stay focused on the business, have empathy for the people, but stay focused on the business, and you do your best to reskill those folks for that job? Or in some cases, they may not be able to be reskilled for that job. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe I'll just sort of leave that out there and we can talk about that a little bit.
So Talia, isn't that something that you do a lot of work on?
Sure. So, I took everything I learned at Revzilla and went out on my own a few months ago to start my own consulting practice. So Shelly's got this kind of wealth of M&A and, putting companies together that are in crisis. And to her point, this is a different kind of crisis. I think a lot of companies are being faced with pivot or die. And in the pivot or die crisis, the companies that emerge from this are the ones who will be looking to figure out how to redeploy their talent. So I'm encouraging folks to take a look at all of your people, and not just where, one particular department, needs a lift, but if you think about what the next phase of your business is going to look like, who do you have? So I think this is supposed to be a conversation around, building your dream team. Before COVID, ideally, you would have already had your dream team, right? Your company was operating like it was basically invincible. The economy was crushing it. Everything was fine. Yeah. So essentially, you already had your dream team. Just because your business has to pivot doesn't mean your dream team isn't already under your roof. So taking a look at who already has the institutional knowledge, who knows how to follow the money, who knows your customer base, who knows all of these things. And then, as Shelly said, can they be retrained? And really, the answer needs to be of yes. They need to be, yes, we can. So start from a place of yes. Do the very best that you can to try not to add folks to that unemployment number. Because if you're looking at what the next phase of your business is, and if you are pivoting, the people that you have on your team, there's still talent there. They still need to be redeployed in a way that can support what the future of your business is going to be. That's what my focus has been.
Very good.
So,
very good.
Do you mind if I just jump in?
No, go ahead.
So I know we're talking about kind of in the time of a crisis, what happens, but really what Shelly and Talia are talking about, it's having the dream team, but I think you need to always reassess, right? It's not just the crisis. And, I'm not the HR practitioner, but I would say it needs to be on an ongoing basis. Probably, the 3 of these folks are HR practitioners. They can talk about how often, but don't you think this should be a common practice and it doesn't have to be a big deal, maybe just an ongoing?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Especially if you look at it from a, kind of like a traditional succession planning model, right? So if you were to sit down with department leads and say, if you weren't here, if this person left, who was going to take over? It can't be so siloed that you're not considering talent that comes from other areas of the company. Just because one person doesn't know how to or can't fit every single box of the, essential responsibilities of a job description does not mean that they are not capable of doing the job. Then you have to look at talent on the whole. And instead of, trying to figure out fitting a person into a job you have to look at their entire skill set. So, and that talent comes from a variety of different departments. Just because one person hasn't worked in one area doesn't mean that they can't do the job. Go ahead, Shelly.
I'm sorry. And Kelly, to your point, we have to stay focused on the business strategy. It can't just be, I have a team of 10 and 2 of them are underperforming. So how do I fix it so that the other 8 can pick up the work? That's a different conversation versus, I don't know, twice a year, once a year, whatever, at your business strategy meeting, at your strategy planning meetings. You have to, I would suggest you have those conversations to say, we're going to see a little tweak in our business next year. Do we have the right people to handle that? So it should be part of those regular conversations so that it is ongoing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to jump in on, double down on that, in those coaching conversations that you're having, to really understand, you're trying to find that sweet spot where that person can both do what the job needs, but also they're really giving their best because it's something that they feel they're at their best. It's leveraging their strengths. So really those coaching conversations that you're having, whether it's you as a business owner or managers that are having, to really uncover those, maybe there's interests that people have or other experience that they have from other roles that you can leverage, especially during these times when, as a small business, you might be making a strategic hire, but a lot of people are putting hiring on hold. So you have to sometimes use your employees as utility players to fill in the gap until you can, make that strategic hire. So those coaching conversations that you're having, really uncovering, so that you can get to the sweet spot of the employee really giving the business what it needs, but also they're learning, they're growing, and they're going to give their best to you.
Cool. Well, I think there's a couple things that you guys have mentioned that I see in the businesses is that we, as Shelley said, and others alluded to, is that there's this annual type strategic planning that you do. Well, I think that got compressed in a matter of weeks, and we didn't know it was happening because when you talk about, just say, take a restaurant because it's an easy example. I don't serve my meals inside anymore. I have to be a drive up type of restaurant. That's a big change, and that's a complete shift in your business. And I think that's what we really have. The challenge is that we took all this change that we need to do and compressed it just like that. And we have to make that. We basically have to do a strategic planning exercise in a time frame that normally, you start strategic planning in October or September, and you roll through so that by the end of the year it's done. You got 3-4 months. Well, now we got weeks, and I think that's part of it. And then as someone else said about the utility players, that's really important to identify your utility players that have proven that they are able to be flexible in your business, because as I believe was Talia mentioned, your business is going through a period of change now, and it will evolve into something that's different 6 months from now. And you kind of have to, and you Pam alluded to the fact that you have to keep your eye on that. But I think those utility players now are going to be really key in getting your business to that point. Because if you say you know what it's going to look like 6 months from now, you're probably just lying to yourself. So from that standpoint, what are you seeing people do that isn't allowing them to do some of this assessment and restructuring? What are some things that people can do? I should. That's my question to the panel.
Well, I think Talia and I touched upon it a little bit already, which is if you're not having discussions at the leadership level about what your business needs, even if you just say 6 months from now, we can worry about 24 months or 12 months from now. You have to sit down as a leadership team. In fact, I called with the client yesterday and I said, we should do this next week. Get the entire leadership team together and say, how are all of our departments changing while the rest of us are paying attention to our department? Yours is changing and so is yours. So let's sit down together and say, what does it look like? What do we think it's going to look like? How are we seeing our business shift? And then how do we know we're prepared for that? I go back to my client that's an insurance company, their claims processing, their claims adjudication, by the way, they've made automated. So they don't need people flipping through pieces of paper anymore. That frees up 7 people. Now what do we do with them? Right? Just the automation, because we had to be remote versus being in the building, force them to be automatic. And now it's easier, cost effective, cheaper. So now we have 7 people. What do we do with them? But so I think as a leadership team, you have to make it a point to have that conversation now. I mean, we're 3 months in now, right? A quarter has gone past us, so we have to do that now.
Well, one of the things is, it's interesting to see. It's easier to see it now, during this period, and a lot of them are kind of snapping out of it. And I think the really important part is because it's been about 10 years since we've gone through something like this, and you don't realize, when things are humming along, and you don't pay attention to that. Man, it's like, gotta remember, because you do need to do this, on a routine basis, but it has to be a discipline to remind yourself, because otherwise it just sails under your nose and you never realize where the gaps are.
And I'd imagine the board's going to start asking, right? If you're a company that has a board of directors, the board's going to start asking for these kinds of conversations as your business is hopefully surviving through this crisis. I mean, you got to get ahead of that and have those conversations proactively.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I see companies too now laying off people. We're starting to talk to people out there on the street now, and then there are other ones who are grabbing them up, and it's a sign. I'm like, that company's in trouble. I mean, they're putting some good people out there, and not because they really need to. I think there's some critical mistakes being made.
I think a lot of the conversation that's happening within the HR community as well is, what is happening to the companies who are doing a decent job of trying to kind of stay alive and pivot, but they're treating people poorly. They're not considering what their new needs are. They're not considering what their specific needs are. Companies are just expecting people to perform at the level they were when they were in the office as well. So there's going to be a shift where the companies who are assessing the talent that's under their roof are assuming that the market is so soft, these people have nowhere to go. And that is such a false sense to rely on, that you're thinking, there's no jobs out there, people aren't going to find this work. And that's actually not true. And the folks that are being looked at as top talent, or can be moved, or can easily be retrained, or can be redeployed, they're not always going to be there if they don't get the sense that you actually care about them in this moment. So I think that's something that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, I was just talking to Ben Baker in another room, and he kind of brought up that the whole employee engagement is really, really important right now. People are out on their own, and from a recruiting standpoint, people will take my calls now because they're at home. They can, and they're feeling, people aren't engaged. And just like a side note, I have a client that sells like promotional products, and he was like, I don't, there's nothing for me to sell right now. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you need to be pushing things for employees, because people at the minimum need to be sending things to make people feel part of the office.
That's right.
Right? The home office, just a side note, but that's really important. So to Talia's point, that's huge.
And I personally think that the talent that is out there now is ripe for the picking. I think 6 months from now, there's not going to be that great talent available if you're going to start hiring again November, December. And certainly Kelly could probably speak better to me around sort of trends. But I think if people are out there now, you can find good folks. November, December, you may not have the best choices because those folks will have already been picked up.
Yes. There is a lot of talent out there. Yeah.
I was going to. The other thing that I saw from one of our clients was the fact that
how should companies manage questionable employees, including outwardly discriminators or ones who have difficulty keeping their political and religious ideologies out of the workplace in these times?
Oh, that's
provocative.
Yeah.
I'll post it in the chat so we can all see it here. But
I'll just say something really quickly, that I have a couple folks in my network that are employment lawyers, and they have both said that companies are taking opportunity right now to get rid of those people under, COVID, but it's really not. So they're getting rid of the people that would have been difficult to get rid of in a normal circumstance.
Yeah.
So there's going to be those people available too, which makes it harder for a recruiter to kind of weed out, right?
The same could be said about eliminating people from the organization, that were underperforming under the guise of, COVID, which that's an unfortunate excuse. But, to Kelly's point, if you've been reading anything that's coming out from the employment lawyers who are consistently blogging about this and have been for years, this is more of a heightened and more, I think, public, for some reason, just, people saying whatever they want, has kind of increased. But for years, the employment lawyers have been encouraging companies to address head on outward racist, we're not talking about having a political conversation or expressing views. I want to be clear that there is a difference. You're talking about looking at the folks who are making outwardly racist comments, folks that are participating in behavior that they believe they can hide under their First Amendment rights. We could have multiple discussions on just this. So I don't want to take up anyone else's, I don't want to take up more time than I need to, but if you want to fire people and blame COVID because you didn't have the nerve to stand up for the rest of your organization, then use COVID as an excuse. But for years, employment attorneys have been guiding companies on how to address this. I am not an attorney, nor do I want to be or claim to be. But I think that if you have questions about how to do that for your organization, that you need to call a lawyer. This isn't going to go away, and it's been around for years. So,
well, I think those employees are a liability now, perhaps. I mean, and it's reason enough.
Well, always been a liability. Just to be real clear, they've always been a liability. I mean, because when you don't have a homogeneous, and that's probably not the right word, but a good conducive workplace, you don't have the best people. Let's just get at that. Let's just get at it, and your most talented people, I don't care who it is. If you got your most talented person is a racist, they're hurting your company. I don't care. You got to get, you got to get the people that can understand that working together and treating people equally and fairly is important. They don't need to be in your business.
See a comment here that says the racist, sexist, or whatever comments are hurting the brand. That can't be the focus of a company's attention in trying to address the racist, sexist, whatever comments. The brand is one thing, your employees are another. And if the brand is your focus, you want to making a correction by firing someone who's making those comments, that's the wrong focus. I want to say that.
Yeah, and I would also add, I often say to managers who, let's say, are having issues with the underperforming employee, I think this is the same if someone else in the organization is perceived as a racist or sexist or whatever. If you're the leader of that person, you are kidding yourself if you don't think everybody else around you and on your team knows it. So it's not like a secret that we think, Johnny's a sexist. Everybody knows that works with Johnny because they work with him and they sit side by him or remote with him now. And so you're kidding yourself if you don't think that other people know it. And people are watching you to see what you're doing about it.
It kills the culture, and it only takes one bad apple. I mean, when I was growing the PitchBook sales team, I was hiring 20 people a month. And sometimes I'd have to fire 10 in a month. But, we were getting kids right out of college. You kind of got this weird petri dish of talent and different skill sets. And if I got wind of something, I mean, fortunately, Washington, we're an at-will employer, but I'd still put them on a 90-day performance plan and tell them exactly what's wrong. And I would fire them in clean conscience because it's about the team and it's about the culture. I mean, hurting, like you said, Talia, hurting the brand is one thing, but more importantly, if the morale and the energy of the team is compromised, the performance will suffer drastically.
Well, and I think at that point, with people at home, it's then easier for them to engage with each other too, right? In this kind of negative gossip environment because they're at home. They don't have to worry about being in the office. So.
Yeah. Well, this something hits home to me. I grew up in the Midwest and didn't really understand this thing, and I moved to the Southeast and began running businesses there and didn't tolerate it at all, and was quite honestly shocked by it when I was there. Not saying it doesn't happen everywhere, but it was different. And leaders that don't stand up and let people know that it's not right, you shouldn't be a leader. As simple as that. If you can't make sure that your workplace is not the place it should be, you need to rethink whether you are the leader or not. Because there are times when you're going to make very unpopular decisions, but they have to be the best decisions for your organization. And this is something that I'm very passionate about. So, and unfortunately, we have to have things like this happen to make us talk about it more. And I had I didn't really even think about that we were going to be talking about this today, but it is something that if leaders aren't standing up and doing what's right.
Damon, I mean, that you're bringing up a great point. So, I would pose this question to Lisa, Ty, and Shelley. Like, so we're talking about, creating your dream team and assessing, talent and what you need. How do you assess the leaders, the executives? So if the executives and leaders are making these decisions, how are you making sure that we're assessing them?
Yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, first of all, you have to understand, right, what the culture of your company is. And then I would ask questions around, talk to me about the teams that you've led. How have you, I often ask, when I help CEOs interview senior leaders, let's say we're interviewing a CIO, Chief Information Officer. I also ask questions like, how have you been inclusive in other areas of the business? Not inclusive in terms of, race, but you start to understand how they think about including others in their decision making. Ask about the people that have worked with them. Who have they brought along in their career? I always ask, what's the one thing you're most proud of as a leader in your career? And often you get those types of stories that help you start to identify that. It's a great question. It's a great question. I don't think, I often also think it's through observed behaviors. I think interviewing people for the first time is harder to understand. You can definitely get a better sense when you're working with someone side by side. But you can also see from other organizations they belong to, other community groups that they belong to. Sometimes looking at their LinkedIn profile, you'll get those ideas and then ask them about that and see what they have to say about their level of engagement or involvement.
And every single one of those questions that Shelley just shared can be asked of any person in the organization. Being in a leadership position by title is one thing. You have leaders in your organization all over the place. And it's the people who are in positions of leadership to ask those questions that Shelley posed of everyone. And those are that's how you decide who you're going to invest in. So if you do want to bring in someone to do maybe a formal leadership development training, right? A third party comes in and does a series of classes with a group of people. The ones that can effectively answer the types of questions that Shelley just posed are the ones that need to be involved in those trainings. It's not the people that are in positions of leadership by title. It's the set of behaviors that they are demonstrating.
Yeah, we've got Dr. Aaliyah on the stage with us now. What are your thoughts on this?
I think first of all, you have to address people's behaviors. If there's racist or sexist behaviors and you fire them under the COVID, you're doing them and yourself a disservice. It's disingenuous. I would go directly to why you're being let go and offer them a second chance in life. Maybe getting let go because of those behaviors will make them think twice and maybe get some counseling, get some help, and the next company will benefit from that. I think if you allow that to persist within a company, a department, a division, you're basically allowing consciously as a leader cancer to grow within your organization. And that cannot be tolerated, period.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the other thing that I'm going to add before Randy pipes up is that business leaders that don't understand that inclusion allows you to have a stronger team are missing out. Because even years ago, when we would do lean manufacturing redesigns of a process, a product, whatever, you would bring people from the accounting group. You would bring people from the sales group. You bring people off the street sometimes to get different viewpoints. That is so valuable in a business. You have to be inclusive. And if we talk about being inclusive, I think it helps us to force out the undesired behaviors. But as you said, Dr. Aaliyah, I mean, in my experience, the first time I walked up to someone and said, listen, I heard that once, I will never hear it again, or you're gone the next time, that's the end. I was looked like, oh, what do you mean? I said, that does not happen here. If it happens, anybody, but once you say that, the organization understands. You, as a leader, you set the expectations on some of those things. What's acceptable?
You're totally right. You're totally right, Damon. And diverse teams and diverse cultures, there are enough studies now that we don't even have to say it. They're more productive. They're more innovative. So that's it. That's a given. So it makes sense. It just makes sense. People from different. Sorry, go ahead.
Be diverse, I think, has a profit motive to it. Rather than just be diverse for diversity's sake, you aren't going to sell your product or service. You're going to sell product or service to people like you, and if that's all it is, you're limiting yourself.
Totally.
I'm sure people probably get sick of me hearing about harping on kindness, but listen, everything we're talking about right now is all about kindness. It's all about kindness. Embraces everything that we're talking about here. And it's time. Some people get bothered when I bring up kindness and business together, but the fact is we need to get past what I call Voldemort syndrome. You remember in the Harry Potter movies, everybody's he who must not be named. We can't say the name Voldemort. Let's get past being able to say the word kindness and business together. Because the fact is, we all know everything we've been talking about. In order to be able to connect to people, you have to have trustworthy relationships, right? What's the key? The keystone of trustworthy relationship is connecting to the heart. What's the key ingredient to connecting to people's hearts? It's kindness. It's leading with warmth. It's being able to understand them. It's not just emotional intelligence, it's whole being intelligence. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, understanding those things, understanding that when people come into the building, they don't just dump their needs as humans at the door. Yeah. And so,
you know what?
If you do a what I call a corporate kindness cultural assessment or corporate kindness culture assessment, and lead with certain what I call kindness health indicators, you look at those things and you measure how you're doing in your business with those specific areas. You can uncover and bring to light areas of toxicity. You can uncover areas where people are doing great in certain things. Then you can also uncover areas where there's opportunities for improvement. And until you do that, some kind of assessment like that, you're not going to be able to uncover those areas, and you're not going to be able to address the toxicity that's there. Every organization, doesn't matter who it is, or every one of us here has dealt with some kind of toxicity in an organization.
Yeah. I also find too, Randy, if I could, some in times of crisis, people say, here's the situation. What's the right thing? What do we do? And I always say, well, what's the right thing to do? Exactly. It's very un-HR of me to say, who cares about the policy? But sometimes the policy doesn't matter. It's what's the right thing to do along the lines of kindness. Let's treat the situation for what's right. And then we can worry about the policy or whatever else behind it. But what's the right thing to do?
Yeah. And that's great. And that's where, I would just say, and I'm going to be quiet now. I'll get off I play the note of kindness over and over again, and I'll get off my soapbox. But there's a great line from the Disney live version of Cinderella, where the mother is dying and she's talking to her daughter and she says, "Have courage and be kind." Mm-hmm. In business, we need to have the courage to be kind. Yeah. Have the courage to be kind and have the courage to do those things. And understand your people. And what Damon is talking about, when you want to create a great culture, the leaders that create that kind of culture are the leaders whose employees know they care. And I can tell you right now, all the people that are home right now that have been away from the office and are not having direct interaction with their colleagues and their leadership, those leaders, those companies that are going to come out of this crisis on fire are the companies where the leaders have taken the time to stay in touch with their employees, to let them know that they're thinking about them, to ask them how they're doing, to ask them if they care, and if there's anything that they need. Those leaders and those companies are the ones that are going to come out of this on fire. For those leaders that haven't stayed in touch, I was just talking to a guy and said leaders, for example, an article, I think it was in Philadelphia, I'm not sure, they came out and said like 65% of the people surveyed said they haven't had any contact with their leadership in 2 months. How many of you think and believe for a minute that those people aren't sitting at home looking for other job opportunities?
Right. Yeah. 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 That's for sure. That's for sure. And we had and their name escapes me. I had someone on here from an engineering firm in Seattle speaking, an HR manager a few weeks ago. Yeah. And I know that they've organized all different kinds of things for their employees, the entire employees, like from simple stuff to, they organized getting a chili cooking kit to all their employees. And then they invited them to give, share how the chili turned out, what they did with it, just different things like that to stay in touch with people. And then of course the company-wide Zoom meetings that you can have. But as Randy said, that is so important in any time, really. You think about it, it's not just important now. I mean, just because we're having trouble now doesn't mean it's important. If those leaders aren't communicating like that with everyone, they're not engaging with them. Just like with the outside world, they have to engage internally. So, Con, you've been on here a while. I want to hear what you got to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the comments from the panel and the team there. I share your much of your experience and background, ladies. 25 years in human capital management and HR development. I've been through my share of M&As, Shelley, and I've been on both sides of that fence, and I know what it feels like on either side of that. To me, I wanted to bring it back, not just dealing with that percentage of 5 to 10% of extremes where we're going to be talking about termination and things like that, but let's bring it back to the bulk of the people that are going to be impacted by this for a minute. Those organizations, to Randy's point, that treat their people well now are the ones that are going to come out ahead of this. People forget they have short-term memory loss right now. 3 months ago, they were scrambling to find talent and they were paying top dollar for it. When this crisis is over, they will find themselves that pendulum has swung back again, and they're going to be scrambling to find that talent again. There are many organizations that I've witnessed that have basically thrown out the baby with the bathwater in order to safeguard themselves, to cut costs. They've released their talent back into the pool, thinking that, oh, well, we'll just pick them up on the way back, or they're expendable. It's because they don't have a proper human capital management strategy. They don't align things. If you just put your strategy down and you don't think about who's going to execute that strategy, it's just a paper exercise. You haven't done anything from that piece. You need the horses to run that race. And at this point in time, I'm coaching a lot of my clients right now that this is the prime time to go out, prune your garden, because I've been working with them to make sure that they have a full visibility into their talent all the way down in their entire plan, as far as all of their talent segmentation, everything that they need to be doing. They know where they need to prune. And now they know what talent exists out there that they can go and replace and top grade a lot of their workforce right now. People that are smart that way can think strategically, but in more practical terms, reaching out, those touch points, this is where you want your leadership team to be creative, to be able to find ways to stay connected to that workforce, engage that workforce, and know that you give a damn about them. This is the time where you make or break lifers. And even if they don't stay with you, the communication, the brand, the employment brand that you will generate from that piece can make or break your company down the road for how people are going to perceive you. This pendulum will swing again. It will come full circle back again. And there's going to be situations where the companies that have handled the pivot well, the crisis well, are going to be able to do it. And one last point on those leaders. I've witnessed a specific conversation that I want to share with you guys. I had somebody that came to me and says, we've decided as a company that we are going to take measures in the office. We're going to start bringing people back in. We're going to do shifts, half one week, half the next. We've decided that we're going to social distance and we're going to wear masks. Well, there's several leaders within the company, mid-level managers, that are coming in, no mask, don't give a damn about anything else. Their personal views, their personal perspectives are coming in now and basically deciding how they're going to behave based on their personal views, rather than thinking that they are a representative of the leadership team. And that's the part where I'm going to caution all of them to step in. I don't really give a damn what your perspective is personally. I couldn't care less. But if you are representing this organization internally and externally, I expect you to behave in a way that's consistent with what we've agreed to do. If you don't want to do that, I don't have to pay you.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, a true leader is going to be concerned
100%.
about the people around them, right? And they're going to wear masks
Yep.
because it's not about them.
Yep.
It's about the people around them.
Exactly. And it comes back again to, leaders, they're not leaders if they allow that to happen. They're not the leaders that they should be. And just simple as that. And it is. And it brings up a lot of questions. And next week we're going to be talking about the brand and the importance of that and the way you're treating people now, how it affects your ability to recruit in the future and things like that. And it will swing back as concept. They're going to be the best talent goes fast. And we got a very short window here where the quite honestly not as good businesses dropped a lot of talent. And even when you look at we've got a client that does software work, and they're seeing that companies like Facebook and Google and these other ones, because the remote work has eliminated the geographical barriers, they're going outside to Silicon Valley and they're hiring people wherever they can find the best developers and paying them, what there should be appropriate for their area where they work, which Facebook came out and said that. I think Kelly and I were talking about that this week, which might not be as good as it used to be, but still they're going to, if you think you got a developer down the street that's not going to go somewhere, they're going to go someplace. Or other employees, anybody that can do remote work, you would consider that they can go anywhere in the United States now and work. That's another consideration you have to really think about. So, but back again to this, when we go back into this whole compression of what happened and things like that, what are some of that? We're getting into the last bit, so I want to let you guys kind of summarize. If you were in a business today, what are the things that you would be doing to be able to go, okay, this is step one. And I think Shelley kind of alluded to that, is sit down as your leadership team. But then what are the steps that you would take over the next, 30 to 60 days to really position yourself then to be able to go, okay, we're ready to move forward and get the team we want?
I think great question. As I think about this leadership conversation I'm going to have with one of my clients next Tuesday, it's really going to push people to think outside their comfort zone and really take a look at their business. And I think 30 days from now, you have to start crafting a plan on how your business will be shifting and what you're going to do to survive. Every business, right? There's a great Korn Ferry article about this 2x2 quadrant on how business are doing, right? They're either thriving, disrupting, surviving, and I forget the fourth quadrant. And pieces of your business are within those. But I think you really have to have these difficult conversations to think about 6, 9, 12 months from now. I mean, in 30 days, you have to have some sort of plan in place. I think you have to.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
What your business is going to look like. So get up.
We have a question for the panel. It's what trends are you seeing on instability with schools, daycares, et cetera, regarding flexibility for working parents coming out of COVID? Are you seeing companies offering more flexibility as a benefit to accommodate that?
I can speak to that. Specific to our company, we have a lot of early career professionals. 46% of our employees are caregivers to small children. So we have had to have 100% flexibility, and what we're doing is focusing on the outcome and the output that they're doing. And we're not focused on, what time they're at their computer. We don't want our employees to think about their role as if they were an hourly employee anyway. So for us, it is a shift for managers. And in fact, many of our managers are those parents. Yeah. So it's really, it's a different way to think about it, but it's actually really the right way to think about it. So we are having to accommodate that. Interestingly, for us, the 6 people who are interested in coming back to the office in July are the people that have small children at home. So there's that component. Yeah. So for us, it's about 100% flexibility with when do you return to the office, when you're working. And that's really, each manager has to work with their employee, and if employee needs an exception, then we work with them.
Yeah, that you do have to be flexible, I think. And and as one point you brought up is it's tough for a lot of managers that are used to walking around. And I don't know if it was Kelly, if it was when we were talking this week, but somebody had mentioned about, managers that were used to managing by walking around can't do it anymore. They have to walk around electronically, basically. And the flexibility in that, because heck, if anyone's raised kids, that it's funny. We were talking to Ira Bowman yesterday, and Ira's got a large family, and he said he was on LinkedIn Live, and World War III going on in the background, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And you got to be flexible as a business and focus on the outcomes, as you said. It's like, and that's hard because some businesses were more concerned with, are you here at 8 o'clock and do you stay until 5 o'clock and you logged in, all that junk, rather than how much work they got done. And that really is better for the businesses long term to focus on the outcomes. So anyway,
it's a culture shift too, Kelly, for a lot of companies. Ben. To Lisa's point, where it's used, get in your desk by 8. I think people thought you were productive if you were in the office, right? Whether you were at your desk at 8:15 and walked around all day and did nothing. Yeah. The fact that we saw you, we thought you were productive. It has to be a culture shift. And I think employees that are parents are the biggest population that need what I just call, they just need grace and understanding over the next several months, particularly through September, I would suggest. Hopefully there'll be some sort of school classroom in September, but that may not be the case. And that's the group that really needs us to be kind and do the right thing. And that might be changing jobs a little bit, right? Like shifting the way your role is structured, and maybe giving other work to people who don't have that challenge. And I give some of my work to you because you need the flexibility. I mean, you have to really be creative.
It runs against all the traditional notions of leadership and management. And there's few companies do this. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is one. Netflix is another. But measure people on their output, not their input. Mm-hmm. Are they getting everything done that you asked of them? And if they are, leave them alone. Let them be with their family, because maybe their creative space is 11:30 at night when their family's asleep and they got their headphones on and they can just buckle down. You know what I mean? And if they're not meeting the output, then have that conversation. But I think that's but like you were saying, Shelley, that shift needs to happen in terms of how productivity is measured. It's not a matter of that 8 to 5.
Yeah, that's where your leadership really needs to lead the charge, right? Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't have like statistics, but anecdotally, I keep hearing from business leaders as I talk to them, their teams are as productive or more productive, which is fascinating considering many of them have kids at home. Like Lisa said, almost 50% of their staff has kids at home. And it's, take it from me. I have a kid that works pretty well on his own, but he's bored and frustrated. So there's a lot of creeping into my office. So it's not, it's not easy.
You do have to know your people though, and make sure that increase in productivity isn't coming from kind of like a place of guilt where you have to be on for extended periods of time. I look forward to seeing the reports that come out after all of the physical return to the workspace, if that's necessary, like how long someone was on. Is it an 8 to 8 situation now? Because, my household is childless by choice, which means we can structure and design our entire lives around all kinds of flexibility when it comes to work. But I think a lot of what Shelley brought up, a lot of Kelly brought up, a lot of what Lisa brought up is it's a requirement that you look at your company from a cultural standpoint from top to bottom, right? So like, what does performance look like on the other side of this if a workforce can be distributed on a permanent basis? How are you going to measure performance? Not necessarily output, but like, what does your entire performance management process look like in this new environment? What sort of retrospective are you willing to have your leadership team forced into to look at things from a higher level that didn't work? Like this, HR people love pointing at things in a handbook. Well, there's a damn good chance your handbook fell apart in the middle of all of this because no one was ready for this. Yeah. And the idea that something like this isn't going to happen again, quite frankly, is garbage. So like looking at everything from top to bottom culturally, what didn't hold up, and then being brave enough and honest enough with yourselves as an organization to figure out what your company is going to look like in the future, and then this next phase that everyone's moving toward.
Yeah, and one of the things, Talia, it's 100% that it's just, you got to look at everything. And there's a couple comments here I think are real relevant to that. You know, Dan Bigger said now that he's called back to the office, he's lost a lot of productive time. And I know, like, people in the area here where we live in Seattle is like, listen, you can spend 3 hours commuting every day. You eliminated that from your people. How much does that, not just the 3 hours, but how much does that in terms of, I just drove an hour and a half or rode a bus for an hour and a half. How tired am I when I start working? So split in working maybe fewer days in the office and more days at home. There's so many different ways to use this now. We've proven that remote work is a way to do things. And there's so many combinations, and really helping, as Lisa mentioned and Kelly did with and Shelley with the number of people that are caregivers and other things like that. And then another thing that Christopher Nesbitt brought up, which I think is, I did it for years, but I was just in that position, is splitting your days up. Because some of these people, when we go back and they want to be working from home, you know, I used to walk my son to school every day. And then I would get back and it was like 8:30 or something, and I would work until 2 o'clock. And when he got home from school, we would make sure he was set up, and then he'd work until 6 or 7. And you just do these kind of things. So this split and flexibility and the things that we have to do, if we as businesses and advisors to businesses show leaders how to think about this, they can have much better businesses, because what that does is that opens your pool of talent, just like inclusion does. It's just a different form of inclusion, I think. So great stuff. Because any other thoughts here? We got 6 minutes left. What if there was one thing that you would tell an employer that they should be doing right now, what do you think it would be?
Communicate in all different channels. And if you're doing, we do a weekly all hands, we record it. So if you're not able to make it at that time, you can watch it at 11 p.m. And I think as leaders, also just give your employees the permission. They know that we're being flexible with them, but say to them, can we talk? But it's okay if you're not on video. I realize you have a 2-year-old climbing on you, and maybe you don't want me, your boss, to see you that way. It's okay, just be on the phone. So give them permission.
Yeah.
If you're emailing them, 10 a.m. on Saturday because that's convenient for you, put in the email, not urgent, respond next week. Things like that, little ways to give them permission.
That's a good point, because I've read a lot about that now, that people think just because you send an email at 9 o'clock at night that you're supposed to respond, and that's not the case.
Yeah, someone said it earlier. Talk to
Shelley,
your people on a regular basis. I think you mentioned, or someone else mentioned, sorry, about a survey that was out recently. Talk to your people on a regular basis. They need to hear from you. Listen. I think the events of the last, week certainly have changed for a lot of us living in metropolitan diverse cities. That's a whole other level of conversations we're having to have, but people need to know that you're listening and you're understanding where they are.
Yeah.
Very
know
cool.
when to pass
Very
the
cool.
mic.
Talia.
It doesn't have to be the CEO that's talking all the time. It doesn't have to be the HR person that's talking all the time. If you find a particular challenge that's coming out of a contact center that is very specific to that group versus a fulfillment center, which has a whole other complex set of safety, challenges that have to be discussed. I think letting people know that not all needs are the same, and letting everyone have an opportunity to talk about the challenges that they're experiencing, because as folks are physically at work because they could never stop and they couldn't work from home. I think acknowledging all of the challenges and not having one voice be the only person that's discussing this is really important.
I would say
Kelly,
two
what are
main
your
things.
thoughts?
One is, and it's kind of along the lines of what everyone else said, but have compassion and patience. And then just one more, I said 2, but I'm going to say 3. The last thing is, and I was chatting with some folks in the comments on this, is people are at home, so they're working more. It's harder to cut off your difference between your work day and your personal day. So leaders need to lead by example with that. And just like you said, Damon, like if I send an email to someone at 9, make sure they know I'm not expecting it. I'm just getting it off right now. Like, cause I happen to be sitting here, I'm getting it off my chest, out of my head. They don't need to respond, because that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you just one little hint. I've started using the delay send in Outlook just because I have crazy hours, and that does help because then you can put it in more reasonable hours when people get it. So, Andrew, well, it's so awesome to have Kelly and Lisa, Shelly, and Talia here. You guys have been just incredible. It's such a good event for us today, and to let you guys share your knowledge. I want to thank Kelly for bringing us the Philadelphia connection here and getting these great leaders in here speaking with us today. Getting a ton of good comments from the chat here. I try to over and see it, but next week I think we're going to have another interesting event where we're going to be talking about, okay, we all know that there's a lot of changes going on, and I mean, you guys brought up some stuff today that I think we might even have another event on, and it's just about how you build a flexible workplace to really be, with what we've learned. It's such a key thing, but that my mind goes that way. But next week we've got Kelly going to be talking about recruiting. We've got Lisa going to be talking about from a business standpoint what you're going to be doing there, and Ben Baker is going to be talking about the how you develop your brand to attract the right talent. So from here out, we're going to let Andrew do the conclusion and
great
close
stuff.
This thing down.
Hey, thanks
Awesome,
everybody.
guys.
We'll be going back to the networking on the tables as before, if some of you haven't been on this before, but Kelly, thank you very much. It was great because how this all started was just a chat with Kelly about this topic, and she calls 3 of her friends and the mavens of Philly here the best of the best, and wow, it was great. And I think it dovetails right into our next topic next week, which is really building your organization to attract the top talent, which I'm really interested in understanding. And I think it's a logical next step. So great stuff, guys. Yes, send cheesecakes. They're saying that. A nice comment from the chat. But all good. And we'll close this up, and we'll see you in the conference room.